The words etched into the pristine white invitation felt like a blade against her skin. Sometimes, family can be the cruelest. Victoria Hayes traced the delicate cursive, Sophia's flawless handwriting, as polished and perfect as her life had always been. A bitter smirk played on Victoria's lips. It was almost poetic. She adjusted the smooth folds of her light gray silk dress, its fabric cool against her skin. Every detail of her appearance was meticulously chosen. Makeup refined, yet understated. A simple pearl necklace gleaming at her throat. A quiet tribute to the woman she had become. The very necklace she had gifted herself a decade ago when she opened the Hidden Gem, the restaurant that no one in her family knew existed. Through the towering glass doors of Lame Zone, she caught a glimpse of herself against the city lights. Perched atop the Four Seasons Hotel Boston, the restaurant was a haven of wealth and exclusivity, offering breathtaking views of Beacon Hill's glittering skyline. It was exactly the kind of place Sophia and Margaret would choose, an opulent display of status rather than substance. Victoria exhaled slowly, steadying herself. She knew why they had invited her tonight. It wasn't about family. It wasn't about reunion. No, this was a performance. And if that was the case, she would make sure to give them a show they would never forget. "Do you have a reservation, ma'am?" the hostess at the entrance asked. Victoria handed over her invitation. "The Wilson Clark baby shower." The receptionist gave her an appraising look before scanning the guest list. Victoria recognized that look immediately. Her family had written her off, the embarrassing sister with no real career. A lie that had lasted 10 years. A story they had convinced themselves was true. Inside, the venue was filled with dozens of guests under the warm glow of chandeliers. Women in the latest designer dresses conversed elegantly, champagne glasses in hand. White linen tablecloths draped over round tables, each adorned with pastel blue flower arrangements. At the center of it all stood Sophia, 7 months pregnant, looking as if she had just stepped out of a fashion magazine. She wore a high-end maternity dress, her husband's diamond necklace glistening at her throat. Beside her stood their mother, Margaret, her hair and makeup flawless, dressed in a luxury brand. They were surrounded by members of the Newton Country Club, all deeply engaged in their polished conversations. Margaret had spent her life working her way up, once a real estate agent, now obsessed with her social reputation. She had placed high expectations on her daughters. At least Sophia had met those expectations. Victoria, however, had been the family's long-standing disappointment. "Well, Victoria, you came," her mother said. Her voice held a hint of surprise and just a touch of disapproval. That tone, it was one Victoria had heard too many times before. It was the same tone her mother used whenever she attended a family event, only a few times a year. Their distant relationship was no accident. It had been a mutual decision. Margaret and Sophia lived in an upscale suburban neighborhood, deeply embedded in their nouveau riche social circles. Victoria, by contrast, led a quiet life downtown. Or at least, that was what her family believed. In truth, Victoria was far from the struggling pub worker they imagined her to be. She was the owner and head chef of the Hidden Gem, a high-end restaurant housed in a beautifully restored red brick building in the Beacon Hill district. Harvard professors and Boston's old money elite dined there regularly. The restaurant was beloved, constantly booked 3 months in advance. Yet, Victoria had chosen to remain in the shadows. She appeared in the media only as Chef Liz and stayed entirely off social media. The restaurant's reputation grew exclusively through word of mouth and features in gourmet magazines. But her family knew none of this. As Victoria scanned the room, she noticed the elegantly arranged place cards on the tables. However, her name was nowhere to be found. She caught glimpses of Sophia's private school friends whispering, throwing occasional glances in her direction. "Is that her?" one of them murmured. "The sister everyone talks about?" Another added with a smirk. "I heard she works at a pub," someone else said, their voice dripping with amusement. Victoria had expected this, the condescension, the quiet judgment, the sense of being an outsider among people who believed they had long since outgrown her. Still, she had come, perhaps for closure, perhaps to remind herself why she had chosen a different path. And as she stood there, taking in the opulence around her, she realized something. She didn't need their approval, not anymore. The comments were deliberately loud enough to be heard. Victoria took a deep breath and smiled gracefully. Within her heart lay a quiet confidence, matured over 10 years. She walked slowly through the venue, the chandelier's light casting dancing shadows at her feet. White tablecloths covered the tables, with pastel blue centerpieces arranged elegantly. Many of the guests were familiar faces from Newton's social scene. As she passed by, conversations would pause momentarily, then transform into whispers. Those whispers floated through the venue like a breeze, subtle yet unmistakable. Victoria continued searching for her name card. 10 round tables, each seating 12. Every place had a name card made of high-quality paper, yet nowhere could she find the name Victoria Hayes. In one corner of the venue, hotel staff were arranging finger foods, smoked salmon, caviar-topped blinis, and truffle-flavored quiche. Victoria's trained eye immediately noticed slight imperfections in each presentation. A professional's eye never rests. "Victoria, even though you came all this way," Sophia's voice rang out, carrying a false familiarity. She approached with an effortless grace, her expression carefully curated. "You seem to be having trouble finding your seat." Victoria simply smiled in response. Behind Sophia stood her husband, Nathan, sizing up Victoria with his sharp investment banker gaze. "We had a sudden increase in guests, you see," Sophia continued, putting on an apologetic expression. But her eyes were smiling. "We had to prioritize our important guests." Victoria understood the meaning perfectly. She wasn't an important guest. She never could be. "But don't worry." Sophia's voice brightened as she turned to the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, let's give my sister some credit. She's mastered the fine art of pouring beers and flipping burgers. Maybe she'll open a Michelin-starred pub someday." Laughter rippled through the room like wildfire. Her words spread through the venue like champagne bubbles. Ripples of laughter followed from the surrounding guests. "Yes," Margaret approached, a smug smile forming on her lips. "That would be perfect for you." Victoria felt her stomach twist, the sharp sting of humiliation cutting deeper than she expected. She had been prepared for cold stares, for whispers, but this was a spectacle. 10 years of distance, 10 years of building herself up. And still, to them, she was nothing. But that was their mistake. And she would make sure they realized it. "I'll do that," she said, her voice calm, her smile poised. There was something unreadable in her expression, something almost mysterious. "Enjoy your baby shower." She turned, walked away, her posture flawless, unwavering. The clicks of her luxury heels echoed against the marble floor, sharp and deliberate. Behind her, laughter swirled like poison in the air. Her mother and sister, triumphant, watched as she left. Around them, New gossip circulated like wildfire. In the hallway, Victoria paused by a window. The Boston cityscape glowed in the evening light. Among the buildings, she could see exactly where her restaurant, the Hidden Gem, stood. From behind, Sophia and Margaret watched Victoria's silhouette, backlit by the setting sun. In that golden light, she radiated an almost divine dignity. Yet, to her mother and sister, she appeared as nothing more than a pathetic loser. Victoria started walking toward the elevator. Her steps felt lighter than usual. The time for truth to be revealed was approaching steadily. After retrieving her jacket from the front desk, she left the hotel and crossed the street. Her mother and sister, still smiling with satisfaction, watched her go. However, they didn't yet know that their satisfaction wouldn't last long. Victoria approached what they called a dingy pub. She pulled out her phone. A notification blinked. Michelin inspectors were coming. She exhaled, slow and steady. Dingy pub, huh? They had no idea. Soon, they would. 1 week after the baby shower, Margaret sat at the breakfast table, casually flipping through the pages of the Boston Globe. As her eyes skimmed over the headlines, something made her freeze. There, in large, bold letters, was the title, The Hidden Gem, Boston's Culinary Treasure. Sophia, passing by, noticed her mother's reaction. "What is it?" she asked, leaning over. Margaret didn't respond immediately. Instead, she turned the newspaper slightly, allowing Sophia to see the full spread. Next to beautiful photographs of exquisitely plated dishes was the name of the head chef, Chef Victoria Hayes. Sophia's breath caught in her throat. "Look at this article," she muttered, calling her husband over. Nathan peered over her shoulder, his face paling. "Wait, this can't be the same hidden gem that executives at my firm have been fighting over for months, right?" His voice shook. "People have offered bribes just to get on the waiting list." The article continued with a detailed introduction to the restaurant, describing how the renovated red brick building in Beacon Hill housed an exclusive dining space of just 20 seats, adorned with crystal chandeliers and antique furniture. Even Harvard's president was a regular. Nathan turned another page, his expression shifting. There, at the very center of the feature, was a full-page image of Victoria standing in her pristine, white chef's coat, her arms crossed with quiet confidence. The caption beneath read, "Chef Victoria Hayes, the visionary behind the hidden gem." Margaret, Sophia, and Nathan stared in stunned silence. Outside their elite social bubble, Victoria had thrived, and now the whole city knew. Nathan was impressed. "The executives at our bank have been trying to get reservations too, but there's usually a 3-month wait." Margaret read the article, her pulse pounding. It wasn't just a restaurant. It was a culinary empire, and Victoria, her daughter, the daughter she had dismissed, was at the helm. 2 Michelin stars, featured in international gourmet magazines, and the whole world knew, except them. "Should we try going?" Sophia suggested. "It's such a famous restaurant, right in our neighborhood." However, making a reservation proved far from easy. They were told they needed a letter of recommendation, and even then, the recommender had to be a customer approved by the restaurant. "How pretentious," Margaret muttered in displeasure. The fact that even they, as nouveau riche, couldn't easily access this restaurant wounded their pride. That afternoon, Margaret was shopping in the Beacon Hill area when she happened to pass by the Hidden Gem. The old building softly reflected the afternoon sunlight. The interior was impossible to see from the outside. Then she witnessed an unexpected sight. A luxury car stopped in front of the restaurant, and Victoria stepped out. Though dressed in her usual simple style, her bearing carried an unfamiliar dignity. Behind Victoria came a renowned artist Margaret had seen on television. To her surprise, the artist was speaking to Victoria with the familiarity of an old friend. "Victoria, thank you for another amazing meal. I was moved again today." "The honor is mine. Thank you for coming," Victoria responded. Margaret stopped in her tracks upon hearing this exchange. Victoria's voice carried a confidence and composure she had never heard before. From inside the restaurant, staff members emerged one after another, bowing deeply to Victoria. Their attitude wasn't that of mere colleagues. It was the behavior shown to a respected leader. "Chef, regarding today's Michelin inspector visit," a man who appeared to be the sous chef approached Victoria and spoke quietly. "Yes, proceed as usual," Victoria responded, remarkably calm. Margaret watched intently from behind the building. There was no trace of the Victoria she knew, the daughter she had dismissed as a failure, the one who supposedly worked at a pub. Upon returning home, Margaret immediately called Sophia. "I saw something unbelievable today." Sophia listened, confused by her mother's excited voice. "I saw Victoria going into the hidden gem, and she seemed like a regular there, or even more than that." "No way," Sophia's voice trembled. They desperately tried to recall past events, Victoria's reserved attitude, her deliberate absence from social circles, her deep knowledge of cuisine. Fragmented memories slowly began to make sense. That night, Sophia and Nathan began researching more about the hidden gem. The restaurant's website only briefly listed Chef Liz's background, with no photographs. However, gourmet magazines and review sites were overflowing with praise for the restaurant. Sophia found an old gourmet magazine interview. It says Chef Liz trained at a 3 Michelin star restaurant in France until 10 years ago. 10 years ago, Nathan murmured. That's when Victoria suddenly started distancing herself from the family. Sophia opened the baby shower photos on her smartphone. There was a picture of Victoria's back as she left the venue. Looking at it now, it wasn't the posture of a defeated person at all. Rather, it was full of composure and confidence. "Could we have—" Sophia's voice trailed off, swallowed by the darkness of the room. The next morning, Margaret returned to the hidden gem, this time during early morning preparation. Delivery trucks were bringing in premium ingredients one after another. Among them, Victoria could be seen carefully inspecting each item. Dressed in a crisp white chef's coat, she looked like a completely different person from the daughter Margaret once knew. The staff followed her instructions efficiently, their movements synchronized and precise. There was an undeniable air of command about her. Margaret, for the first time, felt something she had never associated with Victoria before. Awe, unwavering trust, built over 10 years. Margaret felt her chest tighten. The daughter she had dismissed as a mere pub employee was in reality a renowned chef, respected by everyone. And yet, they hadn't realized this truth for an entire decade. 2 weeks after the baby shower, Taste of Boston, the leading gourmet magazine in the city, published a special feature celebrating the Hidden Gem's 10th anniversary. Victoria's photograph was prominently displayed on the cover. She stood in the kitchen with a dignified expression, clad in a pristine white chef's coat. Beside her image, the bold headline read, "The True Face of Chef Liz, the story behind the 2 Michelin star hidden gem." Sophia happened to pick up the magazine in a hospital waiting room. The moment she saw her sister's face, she nearly collapsed. The article traced Victoria's remarkable journey. After graduating from Boston University 10 years ago, Victoria Hayes had trained at some of the most prestigious restaurants in France. Upon returning to the U.S., she had immediately opened the Hidden Gem, not as an unknown entrepreneur, but as the beloved protégé of legendary chef Antoine Moreau. The article meticulously detailed Victoria's brilliant career, her rigorous training period in France, her experience working at 3 Michelin-starred restaurants, and her methodical approach to establishing the Hidden Gem upon her return home. Every step had been planned to perfection. The cuisine of Chef Liz, Victoria Hayes, is an exquisite fusion of classic French techniques with modern innovation. Her signature dish, Landscape of Memories, beautifully marries French traditions with locally sourced New England ingredients. Sophia was so absorbed in the article that she completely forgot about her prenatal checkup. There was an entire side to her sister she had never known. Victoria wasn't just a respected chef, she was revered by global gastronomes. The Hidden Gem is consistently booked 3 months in advance. However, this isn't just a measure of its popularity. Victoria Hayes maintains an exclusive reservation policy, welcoming only those who truly understand and appreciate fine cuisine. To secure a reservation, guests must submit a letter of recommendation from an existing customer. This strict approach reflects her deep, unwavering respect for her craft. As soon as she finished the article, Sophia immediately called her mother, but Margaret had already seen it. She sat alone in her living room, trembling as she read the article over and over. Victoria Hayes' restaurant isn't merely a fine dining establishment, it is an intersection of art and culture. Harvard professors, celebrated artists, renowned writers, all of them consider the Hidden Gem their secret retreat. The article concluded with a quote from Victoria herself. "In cuisine, what matters isn't superficial decoration, but essential value. I want to share that joy only with those who truly understand it." The words struck Margaret like a knife. They felt like a quiet yet undeniable protest against her family. That evening, Nathan attended an executive meeting at his investment bank. He sat at the conference table, his usual composure visibly shaken. Across from him, the chairman leaned back in his chair with a knowing smirk. "Is it true that the owner and chef of the Hidden Gem is your sister-in-law?" Nathan hesitated. "We've been trying to secure a reservation for over 6 months without success," the chairman continued. "Surely you could use your family connection to get us in." Nathan struggled to find the right words. For years, he had carelessly told colleagues that his wife's sister worked at a pub. Now, acknowledging the truth would mean exposing the lie. "I apologize," he said stiffly. "I'm not familiar with the details." A heavy silence filled the conference room. The bank executives exchanged glances. Many of them were well aware that dining at the Hidden Gem had become a status symbol among Boston's elite. That night, Margaret and Sophia stood outside the Hidden Gem. Warm, golden light spilled from the restaurant's windows. Inside, the dining room was full, upper-class guests enjoying an exquisite evening, savoring Victoria's cuisine. Sophia's voice trembled. "What have we done?" Margaret could hardly speak. Her mind replayed the memory of that humiliating moment at the baby shower, when she and Sophia had sent Victoria to a pub. The weight of regret crushed her. She had judged her daughter based on superficial values, never once making the effort to truly understand her. And the cruelest irony of all, Victoria had already secured a place in the very upper-class society that Margaret and Sophia had fought so desperately to belong to. They had aspired to join that world for so long. The next morning, Margaret gathered her courage and called the Hidden Gem. When she tried to make a reservation, she received the usual polite response, Reservations required a letter of recommendation. "I'm sorry, I am Victoria Hayes's mother." Margaret's voice trembled. A moment of silence followed on the other end. "Please wait while I check with the chef," the hostess finally replied. Minutes later, the call resumed. "I'm sorry," the hostess said smoothly, "but Chef Victoria Hayes has a strict policy. No reservations for those who never believed in her worth." The words hit like a punch. Margaret's fingers trembled as she clutched the phone. At that moment, Margaret understood everything. 10 years of contempt, 10 years of scorn. The weight of her past choices bore down on her, overwhelming her with the consequences of continuously judging her daughter based on superficial values. Sophia felt the same. Despite being less than a month from her due date, she visited the hidden gem almost daily, watching from afar as the aroma of exquisite dishes filled the air and satisfied customers came and went. One day, she finally gathered her courage and stepped inside the restaurant. Victoria was nowhere to be seen. Instead, the sous chef approached her with a polite but firm expression. "We apologize, but we are fully booked today. Reservations require a letter of recommendation from existing customers." Just then, Victoria emerged from the kitchen. The sisters' eyes met. Victoria looked at Sophia with a calm expression, an expression one would give to a stranger. "Do you have a letter of recommendation, ma'am?" Those words carried more weight than 10 years of resentment. Sophia fled the restaurant in tears. From a distance, she could see the line of luxury cars outside the hidden gem, the very symbol of the world she and her mother had so desperately aspired to. Ironically, that world now rested in Victoria's hands. Meanwhile, Victoria continued creating perfect dishes as usual. In her heart, there was no longer anger or hatred. Only quiet resignation remained toward the family that had never understood true value. A few days later, Margaret and Sophia found an envelope in their mailbox. It was a letter written in Victoria's beautiful handwriting, printed on high-quality paper. Inside, it contained a short message. "True value lies not in superficial decoration, but in essence. If you are ready to understand that." A month after receiving Victoria's letter, Sophia gave birth to a baby girl. At the hospital, a bouquet arrived, a simple arrangement incorporating seasonal wildflowers. The card attached bore only one word: "Congratulations." But Victoria's handwriting was unmistakable. Unlike the other lavish flower arrangements filling the hospital room, this one was different. There was a gentle kindness in its simplicity, a quiet grace that soothed the heart of anyone who saw it. It seemed to express Victoria's culinary philosophy itself, uncomplicated yet profound. "Mom," Sophia spoke softly while cradling her newborn, "what should we do?" Margaret silently gazed out the window. She had already called multiple times, trying in vain to get a reservation at the hidden gem. Each time, she had received the same polite refusal. Then, one day, another letter arrived from Victoria. "If you truly want to understand, why don't you try working at the restaurant? Start from the bottom. To understand essence, one must begin with the basics." The proposal struck like a thunderbolt. Their nouveau riche pride urged immediate rejection, but they had no other options now. 3 months after giving birth, Sophia stood in the Hidden Gem's kitchen for the first time, not in a pristine white chef's coat, but in a dishwasher's apron. Margaret, too, had taken her place, working weekends as a dining room assistant. The first few weeks were hell. Sophia's hands became rough from scrubbing dishes. Margaret's feet ached from the long hours of standing. Their backs ached. their pride burned. Yet, Victoria showed them no special consideration. Things of value take time to understand. That was all she said. But as time passed, something began to change. While washing dishes, they started noticing the precision in the plating of every meal. While clearing tables, they saw the way guests savored each bite, their expressions filled with genuine appreciation. For the first time, they were not just onlookers. They were inside a world they had never understood before. Sophia started to feel the passion put into each of Victoria's dishes. Margaret began to understand that Sophia started to feel the passion behind each of Victoria's dishes. Margaret began to understand the true meaning of hospitality as she watched customers' delighted faces. After 6 months, Sophia had her first chance to taste Victoria's cooking. It happened during a staff tasting session after a meeting. The first bite. Tears rolled down Sophia's cheeks. 10 years of her sister's emotions, her dedication, and her journey were contained in that dish. A year passed, and Margaret was formally hired as dining room staff, while Sophia became an apprentice cook. Their attitudes and values had transformed completely. The glamour of their former social circle no longer attracted them. Instead, they had developed eyes that could recognize true value. Margaret began attending psychological counseling to confront and dismantle her past values. Sophia started learning cooking fundamentals from scratch, developing a sincere approach to her craft. One night, after closing, Victoria called them both over. Margaret stood before her daughter in the Hidden Gems private dining room, the place where only the most exclusive guests were ever invited. "Victoria, I was wrong." Her voice wavered, but Victoria's expression remained unreadable. "You weren't just wrong, Mother," she said, her voice cool. "You built an entire life around a lie. You made sure I believed I was worthless. And now that the world knows my worth, you want back in?" Margaret swallowed hard. "I want to understand." Victoria studied her for a long moment before finally speaking. "Then earn it." Margaret and Sophia choked up at these words. It meant more than mere forgiveness. It marked the beginning of a new bond between people who had finally come to understand essential value. The following Sunday, the Hidden Gem welcomed a special morning. Though normally open only for dinner, the restaurant opened that day for Margaret, Sophia, and the now 18-month-old baby. Victoria prepared a special brunch for her family, a series of dishes without extravagant decoration, yet filled with deep love. The wildflowers on the table carried the same quiet kindness as the bouquet that had arrived at the hospital that day. "This is my true feeling," Victoria said as she placed a dish before them. "I'm proud that you've learned to see essence rather than appearance." Outside the window, Boston streets were bathed in morning light. The red brick walls of the Hidden Gem stood tall, watching over this new family story. It was the dawn of a new beginning, one earned by understanding true value.